In the too hard basket goes quite a lot of desserts that are made from eggs and they're either some form of set custard. Now, creme caramel tends to fit in with that and most people will not attempt it. I perfectly understand that. Until I mastered how to do it myself, it wasn't a dessert that I would make either. Certainly not if I was having guests anyway. I might make it for myself and just trial it out. But there is a great recipe that I came across quite some time ago. So this is not my original recipe, but I have to say I've made it so many times now that I'm going to share it with you. It is so easy to make. It's almost foolproof, but the key in making this effectively is to make sure that you actually mix the ingredients for quite a long period of time. It's made in a blender, but the more you mix it, the less air bubbles there are in it, and you will get a much smoother texture. That's not to say that the texture that comes out with the air bubbles in it isn't fantastic, because the flavour is still going to be great. Now, with anything like this, with the creme caramel particularly, this is two recipes. We've got the creme caramel, or the custard that's baked in the oven, but you also need the caramel sauce that goes over the top. That's why it's called creme caramel. And the caramel is made from toffee. And the toffee is actually cooked separately with sugar and water on the stove. You then put the two together, and it's important that when you put the two of them together, you do so fairly quickly. So you'll make the toffee, sit that into the bottom of the dariole molds, which we'll be using, and then you pour the custard over the top and then into the oven. Now, the toffee won't stay set. What happens when it gets into the oven, even if it sets outside, it will actually soften up again, so that when you turn out your creme caramel, that toffee will just drizzle all over the top of it. So it's important to have a reasonable amount of it, and also to make sure you do your timing together. Now, the toffee will take approximately 20 minutes to make, and in the meantime you can be making your creme caramel so that you've got the two of them together and then you assemble them. So let's have a look at the ingredients you're going to use. You'll find this really easy because some of it comes out of a can, which is fantastic, and let's see how it's all put together. I know you're going to love this dessert.
The ingredients you'll need for this are as simple as 3 whole eggs, canned condensed milk, sugar and fresh milk, plus the sugar and water you'll use to make the toffee. Now, I'm going to be making the custard part in a blender, which is not only more convenient, it's practically foolproof. And the secret to the success of this recipe is the blender mixing, which I'll explain a little bit later. The first thing we need to do, however, is get the toffee started. Into a saucepan, place the sugar and the water and stir it until the sugar is wet and partially dissolved. Then turn on the heat and continue to stir. You'll need to do this for a few minutes to dissolve the sugar completely. This is essentially the way to make toffee, and it's the first step in making this easy creme caramel recipe. The toffee will be poured into the base of each dariole mould and allowed to set before adding the caramel mixture. It's important during the dissolving process that you keep stirring, otherwise you risk the sugar recrystallising and the toffee not caramelising. Then, when the mixture begins to bubble around the edges of the saucepan and the liquid starts to turn clear, you know the sugar has dissolved and the caramelisation process has begun. At this point, you need to stop stirring and allow the mixture to cook and caramelise without any interference. If you continue to stir once the bubbling has begun, you also risk crystallising the mixture. This is the point of spoon removal. Now stop stirring and allow the mixture to bubble and reduce until it caramelises. This will be obvious by a change in colour from clear to golden. Now let's make the creme mixture. Begin by placing the eggs and the sugar into a blender and blend until they're fully combined and light in colour. Now combine the milks and gradually add to the blender through the top chute while the motor is running. Now allow the mixture to blend for 2 to 4 minutes to ensure thorough emulsification of the ingredients and elimination of as many air bubbles as possible. The longer you blend, the better texture the creme mixture will have. Now let's check our toffee. It should be fiercely bubbling by now and very clear. You may notice some of the sugar crystals around the sides of the saucepan have begun to caramelise and change colour. As the colour change becomes very obvious, pick up the saucepan and give it a bit of a swirl, allowing the toffee to colour and even out. Now place the saucepan back on the hob and turn off the heat. The residual heat in the saucepan and the toffee mixture will continue to caramelise and bring the toffee to the perfect colour. You also want the bubbles to subside a little before pouring into the moulds. Now have your moulds greased either with cooking spray or melted butter and sitting on or in the tray that they'll be cooked in. As you can see, the toffee has further caramelised here and now it's a beautiful golden colour. If you want it a little darker, just swirl it for a little longer before pouring it into the moulds. The longer you leave it, the darker it'll get. Just be careful not to leave it too long so that it sets in that saucepan. Now, cover the base of each mould with some of the toffee. About 1/2 centimetre should be sufficient. The quantity of toffee we made, which is about 1 cup of sugar to 1/3 of a cup of water, should be enough for 4 125ml moulds. You can use any type of mould you like, but straight-sided moulds work best to give the best plated result when serving. I'll show you what I mean when we do that. Now allow the toffee to set for a few minutes so that it's no longer runny. Once the toffee is set, you need to add the cream mixture on the top. But pouring it from your blender will not be easy, so transfer the mixture to a small jug to make the task easier. Now make sure you fill the moulds to the top, and because I'm going to bake these in a steam oven, there's no need to cover the tops. But if you were baking these in a bain-marie in a conventional oven, you would need to cover the top with foil or have them sit in a lidded vessel to prevent the tops from burning. Also, if you're baking them, bake them on a classic convection setting. That is, with no fans on, otherwise you're going to risk browning and curdling. Now place them in the steam oven and cook for around 30 minutes or 60 to 70 minutes if you're baking in a conventional oven. When they're done and cooled for about 30 to 40 minutes, using a butter knife, run it around the inside of the mould between the mould and the custard to loosen it. This is why a straight-sided mould is better to use for this recipe. Then hold the plate at a slight angle and turn the mould upside down onto the plate to release the creme caramel. The toffee will be runny and should run down the sides of the custard. How you place it on the plate will be determined by how you plan on garnishing it and whether you're serving it with anything else. I generally just serve them with a fanned strawberry, because creme caramel really doesn't need much more than that. They're very visually appealing all on their own.
So that wasn't that hard, was it? Now that is something that I know will absolutely impress when you have it for a dinner party. And you can make up the custard well and truly in advance and have it ready. In fact, the longer you leave that custard actually sitting, the better it is. It will get rid of, a bit like with a pancake batter, it'll actually get rid of quite a lot of the air bubbles as it settles. And if you give it a little shake every now and then, just bang it on the desk or on the bench rather, and just give it a bit of a shake, it will help to get rid of those air bubbles. So make it, a couple of hours in advance is absolutely fine, but you will need to store it in the fridge. The toffee, however, will need to be made right before you put it into the oven. So when you've finished your main course and everybody's sort of settling in and having a chat and what have you, then go and put your toffee on, keep your eye on it, then you can make the creme caramel, and it'll only take about 30 minutes to cook. That's if you want them hot. Now if you want them cold, perfectly do them even the day before. Make them in advance, leave them in the dariole mould until you're about to turn them out. Now what will happen if you leave them and you do them the day before is that some of that toffee will set again at the top and you won't get as much of the caramel on the top. Okay, that's just inevitable. So the key with this dessert is you make a decision on which one of those you want to go with. Preferably, from my perspective, I always like to have them fresh, come out of the oven, and that they're hot. So the best way around that is, if you want to make them beforehand, have them being cooked while you're having your entree. That way you can sit and relax for the dessert. You can have an hour or so after the main, sit down and relax, and then turn them out, and they'll work really well. They are delicious, very, very easy, and foolproof almost. Well, almost. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.